the night light. Moving into the duplex felt like a fresh start. After the divorce, I needed somewhere cheap and quiet to rebuild my life. The place was perfect, a small 2-bedroom in an older neighborhood, with my half separated from the other unit by a thin wall. My neighbor seemed nice enough during our brief introduction. Sarah, mid-30s, worked nights at the hospital. She had a daughter, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The first few weeks were blissfully normal. I'd settled into a routine of working my remote job during the day, then unwinding with Netflix in the evenings. The walls were thin enough that I could occasionally hear movement from next door, but nothing disruptive. Just the gentle sounds of domestic life, footsteps, muffled television, the occasional closing door. It was around the 3rd week that I first noticed the light. I'd gotten up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom when I saw it, seeping under the gap beneath my bedroom wall. A soft, yellowish glow, like a night light. It made sense. Sarah's daughter probably needed one to sleep. I thought nothing of it and went back to bed, but the light was there the next night too, and the next. Always the same warm yellow, always steady, never flickering like a candle or shifting like a television screen. Just a constant, unwavering presence bleeding through the wall. I mentioned it to Sarah one morning when we happened to leave for work at the same time. She paused, her hand on her car door, a strange expression crossing her face. "Nightlight," she said slowly. "What exactly are you seeing?" "Just a yellow glow under the wall. Figured Emma might need one to sleep." Sarah's grip tightened on her keys. "Emma doesn't use one anymore. She outgrew it months ago." She was quiet for a moment, staring at the ground. "You said it's yellow?" "Yeah, warm yellow, like those old incandescent bulbs. That's the same color Emma's used to be." She shook her head quickly. "But I threw it out when we moved in, said it was for babies." "Maybe you forgot about another lamp. These old places can be tricky." "No." Her voice was firm, almost defensive. "I know every inch of that apartment. There's no light in that room." She got in her car, then rolled down the window. "Are you sure you're seeing it from Emma's room?" "I think so. The wall between our bedrooms." Sarah's face went pale. "That's not Emma's room. That's the spare room. It's been empty since we moved in." She drove away before I could ask any more questions. The light continued for another week, always there when I went to bed, always gone by morning. I started to find it oddly comforting, like having a gentle companion in the darkness. It reminded me of childhood, of feeling safe and protected. Then Emma started crying. The first time, I almost didn't hear it over the sound of my fan. A soft whimpering, barely audible, through the wall. It lasted maybe 10 minutes before stopping. I felt bad for Sarah. Night shifts were hard enough without a child having nightmares. But it happened again the next night, and the next. Always around the same time, always the same quiet, heartbroken sobbing. The yellow light would glow steadily throughout, never dimming or brightening, just maintaining its warm presence while the child cried. I saw Sarah in the hallway a few days later, looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she moved with the sluggish weight of someone running on empty. "Rough nights?" I asked gently. She looked confused, almost startled. "What do you mean?" "Emma's been having some bad dreams, I think. I've heard her crying through the wall." Sarah stopped dead, her face draining of color. "Crying? What kind of crying?" "Just sad crying, like a scared kid. It's been happening around 2 in the morning." "That's impossible." Her voice was barely a whisper. Emma's been staying at her father's house for the past 2 weeks. She won't be back until next month. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. She's my daughter. Sarah's voice carried a sharp edge, but her hands were shaking. And even if she were here, her room is on the other side of the apartment. You wouldn't hear anything from your bedroom. Then what? How long have you been hearing this? She interrupted, stepping closer. How long exactly? Maybe a week. It's always the same time, always the same duration. Sarah's breathing quickened, always the same, like exactly the same. Yeah, about 12 minutes each time. Why? She backed away from me, her keys jangling in her trembling hands. I need to go. Sarah, wait. I can't talk about this right now. She fumbled with her apartment lock. Please, just try to ignore it. Whatever you're hearing, just ignore it. I apologized and retreated to my apartment, mind racing. If Emma wasn't there, what was I hearing? Could it be coming from somewhere else? The walls in these old places were notoriously thin. Maybe the sound was carrying from another unit or from outside. But Sarah's reaction told me she knew something she wasn't sharing. But that night, I pressed my ear against the wall and listened carefully. The crying was definitely coming from directly on the other side, from the room that should have been empty. I started documenting everything. The light appeared every night at 11:47 p.m. Always the same intensity and color. The crying began at 2:15 a.m. and lasted exactly 12 minutes. I timed it obsessively, taking notes, looking for patterns. The crying was getting clearer too. What had started as muffled whimpers was becoming more distinct. I could make out words sometimes, mama, and please, and something that sounded like hurts. The voice was definitely a child's, high and frightened, with that particular quality that comes from crying so hard you can barely breathe. I started losing sleep. Every night I'd lie awake, waiting for 11:47, watching for that yellow glow. Then I'd count the hours until 2:15, when the crying would begin. I'd press my ear to the wall and listen, trying to understand what was happening in that empty room. It was during the 4th week that I first heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps that creaked across the floor next door. They started around midnight, pacing back and forth, back and forth. The pattern was methodical, almost ritualistic. 10 steps toward the front of the room. Pause. 10 steps back. Pause. Over and over. For hours. The steps would stop just before the crying began. Then, after exactly 12 minutes of sobbing, they would resume. The same measured pace, the same 10-step pattern, continuing until just before dawn. I knocked on Sarah's door the next morning, but she didn't answer. Her car was gone. I waited until evening and tried again. Still nothing. I didn't see her for 3 days. When she finally returned, she looked worse than before. Her hand shook when she unlocked her door, and she avoided making eye contact. Sarah, are you okay? I haven't seen you around. I've been staying at my sister's. Her voice was barely a whisper. I can't sleep here anymore. Why not? She looked at me with haunted eyes, then glanced nervously at her apartment door. You haven't heard it, the walking. My blood turned to ice. You hear it too? Every night, back and forth, back and forth. She wrapped her arms around herself. It stops whenever I try to investigate, like it knows I'm listening. How long has this been going on? Since the day after you moved in. She paused, studying my face. You've been hearing it too, haven't you? That's why you're asking. I nodded slowly, and I still hear the crying. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but You know about the crying. I've been hearing it for weeks, always at the same time, always the same duration. But Emma's not here. She's been gone for... Sarah stopped, her face crumbling. Oh God, what if something happened to her? What if she's trying to tell me something? Sarah, you just said she's safe at her father's. I know what I said, she snapped, then immediately looked ashamed. I'm sorry, I called him yesterday, 3 times. Emma's fine, she's happy there. She doesn't even know about... She gestured vaguely at the building. About what? Sarah looked around the empty hallway, then leaned closer. I called the landlord about the history of this place. Did you know someone died here? I shook my head. A little girl, about Emma's age. It was maybe 15 years ago. She lived in the unit that's now yours. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. They found her in the room that shares a wall with your bedroom. She'd been dead for 3 days. How did she die? Her father he wasn't well. After her mother left, he started drinking, became violent. The neighbors complained about shouting, but no one ever checked on the child. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. They said she hid in her room trying to stay safe, but he found her anyway. The landlord said the father paced that room for hours after, back and forth, back and forth. The police found him 3 days later still walking. He'd had a heart attack, but his body kept moving until it finally collapsed. I felt sick. Sarah, I need to ask you something. Have you been in that room recently? I don't use that room anymore. I keep it locked. She pulled out her keys and showed me a small brass key. But sometimes the door's open when I come home, and the light is on. What light? A yellow light, like a night light. But there's no electricity running to that room. I had it disconnected when I moved in because the wiring was old and dangerous. We stood in the hallway, 2 adults frightened by something we couldn't explain. Sarah rubbed her temples. There's something else, she said quietly. Sometimes I hear my name being called, a child's voice, very faint, like someone calling for their mother. Does it sound like Emma? That's the thing, it doesn't. It sounds like someone else's child, someone who's been calling for a very long time. The yellow light suddenly made perfect sense. A night light. A little girl's attempt to keep the monsters away in the dark. That night, I couldn't bring myself to go to bed. I sat in my living room with every light on, waiting. At 11:47 p.m., the familiar yellow glow appeared under my bedroom wall. At midnight, the pacing began. But this time, I heard something else, a soft scratching sound, like small fingernails against wood. It came from inside the wall, right at the spot where the light was strongest. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward my bedroom. The scratching was getting louder, more frantic. I pressed my ear to the wall. Help me. The voice was so faint I almost missed it. Please help me. I ran outside and pounded on Sarah's door. After a long moment I heard footsteps, then the chain lock rattling. What's wrong? She asked, opening the door just a crack. Her face was pale, eyes wide. I heard her, the voice. She asked me to help her. Sarah's face went white. You heard her speak? She said, help me, please help me. It was coming from inside the wall. Oh God. Sarah opened the door wider, revealing she was fully dressed despite the late hour. I heard it too, but from my side, she was saying something else. What? She kept saying Mama over and over, like she was looking for her mother. Sarah's voice broke. I've been sitting by the wall for hours, just listening. I think she's confused. She thinks I'm her mother. Sarah, this is insane. We need to call someone. Who? The police? They'll think we're crazy. She stepped closer, her voice urgent. But what if she's really there? What if she's been trapped all this time? You want to check the wall? I have a sledgehammer in my storage unit. We could. No! I backed away. This is too much. We need to leave. Both of us. Sarah grabbed my arm. We can't just leave her. She's been calling for help for 15 years, and we're the first people who can hear her. Because we're the first people stupid enough to stay this long. Listen to me. Sarah's grip tightened. My daughter is the same age as that little girl was. If Emma was trapped somewhere, calling for help, wouldn't you want someone to try? Wouldn't you want someone to care? I stared at her, realizing she was right. What are you suggesting? Help me get into that room. Help me find out what happened to her. And if we find something we can't handle? Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Then at least we'll know. At least someone will finally know. Back in my apartment, the pacing had stopped. The scratching had stopped. But the light was brighter now, more intense, casting a warm circle on my bedroom floor. At 2:15 a.m., the crying began as usual. But tonight, I could hear other sounds mixed in. Adult footsteps, heavy and threatening, a door slamming, a man's voice, slurred and angry, shouting words I couldn't make out. The crying became screaming. I grabbed a hammer from my toolbox and began hitting the wall where the light was strongest. The drywall cracked and crumbled. Behind it, I found something that made my hands shake so badly I dropped the hammer. Scratches, dozens of them carved deep into the wooden beam. Small, desperate marks, like a child trying to claw her way out, and written in a shaky hand with what looked like the color of rust over and over. Help me, help me, help me. The light was coming from inside the wall, not electrical, something else, something impossible. I kept tearing at the drywall, chunks falling to the floor. The crying was getting louder, more desperate. The scratching returned, coming from somewhere deeper in the wall. That's when I found the cavity. It was small, maybe 2 feet square, hidden between the support beams. Just large enough for a child to crawl into, to hide. The smell hit me first, sweet and rotten like flowers, left too long in water. The yellow light was stronger now, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. I shined my flashlight into the space. I immediately wished I had it. The bones were tiny, delicate, still wearing scraps of a yellow nightgown. One small hand was pressed against the wall facing my bedroom. Fingers splayed as if she'd been trying to push through. The other hand clutched something plastic, a small nightlight, its cord trailing into the darkness. The crying stopped. My flashlight flickered, and in that instant, her body had vanished. In the sudden silence, I heard something else. Footsteps coming from Sarah's apartment. The same heavy, measured pace I'd been hearing every night. 10 steps toward the front of the room. Pause. 10 steps back. I stumbled backward from the wall, my flashlight beam dancing crazily across the ceiling. The footsteps were getting closer, moving toward the shared wall, toward the cavity where she'd hidden, where she'd died, where her soul was still hiding. I ran. I packed a bag and left that night, staying in a motel until I could find another apartment. I never went back, not even for my security deposit. I told the landlord there was a gas leak, but sometimes in my new place, I wake up at 2:15 a.m. and think I hear crying, soft and heartbroken, like a child who's been waiting too long for someone to help her. The yellow light appears sometimes too, just a gentle glow under my bedroom door, warm and steady. I tell myself it's just the hallway light, or maybe light from outside, but I know that's not true. She's looking for someone who will finally hear her, someone who will help her. and I'm starting to think that following me was the only way she could make sure I never stopped listening. The scratching started again last night.